Hi, Simon Kyo, architect. I'm just interested in the panel's view of what Chris was saying relating to the 60 FM and the 70 sustainability analysis, and that being the primary driver for client output and profitability. And I just wanted to ask the panel is as to how is that progressing in the industry in terms of deliverability for clients? Is it a Leeds? Is it a BREEAM? Or can we get to more levels of specificity in programs to deliver the kind of energy management and energy savings, like for example with wireless networks, etc., to deliver those savings with live data? And where is the industry in relationship to that?
I think that was for Chris. Was that a question or statement? Sorry.
It was just it was to see where I know that we need that level of delivery. Yeah. Chris has said that, and I'm just wondering where the industry is for anybody to row in on, so that we can actually deliver those values to the client during the OpEx phase.
Yeah.
I think it's a question to me. It's where do we think that you can start providing that to us? Where are we at in that stage?
Is that a general? The one thing I should have said before we started the Q&A is feel free, short snappy question might be really good, but also feel free to offer your own view, please, if you want to say what you would suggest. That might start the ball rolling a wee bit easier.
Well, there was in relationship to Flux as being a very useful design tool in the early stages of the development of energy analysis and building orientation to maximise on the outputs. And I was just wondering what maybe the panel had experience of that, or the experience of other softwares to deliver on the post-capex phase.
Go ahead.
It's interesting to note that in this country, BIM is not mandated, lean is not mandated, but energy is mandated. And it is something that we, as an industry, have to take far more seriously now than we've ever done before. And to develop a skill set in order to achieve, Simon, what I think you're hinting at that needs to be achieved, we need to have an educated and developed skill set in around the construction professionals in order to do that. Has it happened as yet? I would doubt it very much. How far away is it? I'd say it's a fair distance away, which is not acceptable because we have been set targets by the European Union that we have to meet. So whether the industry has not quite woken up in terms of design and construction to what is in reality humanity's greatest construction project, which is the retrofit of our existing building stock, that needs to happen, and we need to have this iterative feedback in terms of techniques that have been developed in order to retrofit buildings in order to meet energy requirements. But information from that needs to be fed back into the next iteration of design. And that is a project that's going to happen over the next 20, 30, 40 years, I would suggest.
Just going back to the first question, in terms of, it was a couple of questions and one question, but just going back to the first point that you kind of touched on. In terms of FM, who comes in to do that role? It's something that we looked at in DIT. Is it a new role that needs to be created? Something that I've looked at personally, I've called it the life cycle engineer. So who comes in? Is it for the client? Is it the client that brings somebody in to safeguard him, to ensure that his installation is good, that from the start, that he knows from the start that at the end he has a good product? Is it the client? Is it the client that does it, or is it I suppose the main contractor on the job that gives it as part of his package? Does he say, look, we'll give you this person, but this person, as Chris was saying, it doesn't exist. But as I said, we looked at in DIT a role that's created, and it would be the life cycle engineer, and this guy would come in. He'd come in at the start of the project, but it's the knowledge base that he needs to have to complete the job. I suppose from the start to the end, he need to know exactly what FM system is going in at the start. He needs to know exactly what's going on at the end to know the deliverables right at the start. He'd also be there along the way to ensure that all, I suppose, the equipment that's installed is the best engaged throughout the project. So that's not the information manager. He would be in addition. So who fills that role? Who takes that role? And also who, I suppose, who pays for that? You know, who's going to give that? Is it the general contractor that's going in to win the job? Is he going to do it as part of his package, or does the client bring somebody like this in, a life cycle engineer, to safeguard his investment and to ensure, over the life cycle of the building, that he's getting the best building created that he can within that process? So, it's going to take in someone that knows FM, someone that knows BIM, someone that knows construction. So you're taking a lot of different areas and trying to push into one person to fill, I suppose, that void that you're talking about. But again, it's off. Yeah, it's a long way off.
It's another new role that's emerging out
yeah.
of the disruption. But I was at a conference a few weeks ago in which there was a facade engineer from Arabs talking over in Spain, and they're talking about designing their facades now for a life cycle of 10 years. And designing them so that you can take them down and put up newer, more efficient materials and new, more efficient ways of controlling thermal and everything else that needs to be controlled in terms of reducing the amount of plant that's required for a building. So instead of locking into a facade for 25, 30 years now, Arabs are talking about locking into a facade that for 10 years.
Just the front here. Just before you, Niall, before you say, might throw it out to the room as well. The idea of a mandate. Do we need someone to tell us how to do things better? Or, like Chris had said earlier on, can we not just realise that there's an opportunity, and it's the most competitive advantage for us when we see the gap, fill the gap, offer the efficiencies, take it back into your own business and show the client what he's getting? What's the view? I mean, do people see that do we need to follow the model across the water? Or is it a matter of, we've a pretty organic, a much smaller industry here. It's a very, very open economy, very, very open economy. A lot of externally exported and traded services. The guys in construction are working all over Europe and all over the Middle East, have strings even into large projects in Australia and South Africa. And there'll be people coming back from different big projects in Canada, in the next number of months, number of years. So do we need someone else to tell us that we have to do it? Possibly for areas where you're talking about, Joe, where there's a particular role that's required, that maybe you need that to be defined and need it to be very specific. So perhaps you do need a set of rules for that and a set of guidance notes. But do you have to have a mandate that this must be the standard? Just welcome. I don't know, Niall, probably you weren't going along that line, but hold your question for next if you want. But
I think from working in, having seen it operate in the UK, I think we've missed a message, which is, how much the UK government want to save. And people kind of probably missed that they're the client, and that's the whole thing that does get missed, which is the client. Who's and in a lean perspective, who's your next client? Who's next in the stage? But at some stage, the actual client is the next client, and the UK, I think, so I think we do, because that message is there in the UK, but sometimes we have a misconception between the word value between the UK and Ireland. Like, Irish people hear the word value and they think of a bargain, and the UK have a kind of a broader sense of it sometimes. But I do think it would be, I do think it would be beneficial if we did really look at it in the case of what our clients need. And that, I suppose, will be my question to Chris along those regards. You asked, did anyone put up their hand, anybody ever feed into a 60s situation? And we've been in that situation, and this is where it broke down, because we've been involved, say, and other people here have been involved in PPPs, where you've sat around the room and you've had your FM people in the room, and it's been very beneficial. We've all looked at the life cycle, and that's absolutely fantastic, and you worked on the project for a year. Those projects are few and far between, but you do get to see the process and the benefit of having people in the room. And a more competitive environment, it's hard to get that. So where we've seen the whole life cycle redesigning within BIM doesn't really happen. The redesign doesn't really happen. We go off and we still sketch out, this is cheaper, and this will run for 25 years, and this will only run for 10, and you can buy one of these instead of two of them, or etc. And you get your capex. That's all fantastic. But where we've seen the whole thing break down is your model can be absolutely fine. You can get a reasonable amount of information, say from a Colby drop, of what you expect to maintain so the client can understand and get value over the next 25 years. But then right at the end, your specialist FM guy who's been using his own software for 10 years comes in and he doesn't want to use the model. So that's where we break down. So the model is fine. He wants a Colby drop of everything you've taken from the model, and he wants to go and upload that into his island information. And he might, if you're lucky, commit to in his contract, every 6 months I'll put it back into the model, and there's nothing in there to say that they will or they won't. So in that, you obviously in the standard, these different guys, these multinationals, have all their own bespoke software, they don't talk to each other, etc. The software you're talking about, which is my question, is that a standard? Is there an interoperability issue or a solution in that, in the software that you're talking about for 6D, that when the next customer for us in the room can go and they have an option who they can go to, and they're not tied down to one FM company and they can work without that?
There is a specific solution for that would work across the board on any DMS software that would be BACnet driven. It's VEO by N6, VEO. That's the best solution I've seen on the market so far. I can't say that would not work on any of our projects because we have a bespoke system and we have a standard that would be in place that you would have to follow and adhere to. So I think that's fine depending on owner by owner, as long as that, I guess, standard is outlined ahead of time so you understand what you should really be working towards and you can set up your BEP in accordance with that. But anyway, there are systems out there. It's just very few and far between. And in my experience, they've really tried to upsell what they're capable of, and they don't actually link back into the actual BMMS or CMMS software. So anyway, there are options out there like that.
This man here, sorry, Owen. This man in the check, sorry, first.
Jamie Duffy, in the UK, and primarily working in the PPP space. It's a very interesting arena to actually look at the whole life cycle of what a client needs, how he defines it, how he gets its design built. And there's a real equity stake of the private sector in managing all of those decision sets right the way through a 25-year period. So all of those decisions, the important decisions about how something performs and the benefit that the client gets to see something different in that process that he might not ordinarily see. Your question about the mandate, I would be a bit concerned about trying to get a mandate out of the Irish public sector, if you like. I'd be more in, what's happening here is a range of technologies that have come to play and have got past their tipping point, that they're all starting to allow interoperability across our supply chain. And it's a very fluid space. A mandate is probably going to be something that's going to pop out once, it's going to say what we need to do by 2 or 3 years' time. I don't think a fixed statement about what we can achieve in terms of a particular standard can be said at one point in time. I think we need to, it would be more important that we keep the education focused so that people are aware of the technological improvements and the efficiency benefits, and make clients watch that story very usefully all the time, because all of these improvements and efficiencies ultimately drive down costs for the client. So the quicker the industry processes streamline themselves, the better. So I would be more along the lines of education, good collaboration amongst the sort of the industry stakeholders to produce very good guidance notes so that everybody's informed about best practices, good technologies, because I think the market side will drive the efficiencies. And I think if you get a mandate, it will be on a public procurement side, it will be a small segment. I think it would be more disruptive. I think the focus on the public sector side should be to try and get barriers out of the way, sort of correct contract forms, to correct sort of interface contracts, that they're not creating conflict around barriers or whatever, that we just enable these more collaborative efficiency approaches in the technologies. Just a comment.
That's very, very helpful. And I think for anyone in the room, this man next, for anyone in the room, without pointing to the obvious, if there was hypothetically a large, say, social housing programme about to kick off at some point in the near future, one thing I've tried to explain to contractors is the very, very first thing you need to understand is what terminology your prospective client is using, and be in the same space as them. So when you're going to those meetings, that you're at least at stage one, so you can talk the same language, you know. So that's very helpful.
Hello. Sorry, my name's James Howard. We, as a company, have developed a CDE system, and because I'm from the north, we're in the UK marketplace. Just if I make 2 points, one is a question, one's a statement. The EU is creating a BIM standard. You might want to have a look at that, just as a matter of interest. I was speaking to the chairman of that particular, who's heading up that group. So they're looking at starting in 2017, and like the UK, going through to a standard by 2020. So I don't know where the UK is going to be within Europe, but that's another issue. The second question I would like to ask is to Joe. Obviously, your organisation has spent a lot of time, a lot of effort planning, structuring your training and the processes. Now, I would be quite clear, we provide a bit of software technology, but the biggest part of the change is in the processes and in the training and the knowledge transfer between all of the senior management right down to the people at the coalface. What timeline, the question, okay, with the backdrop of that, what sort of timeline did your organisation give yourselves? I know it's an ongoing process, but what type of structured process did you try to put in place, and what sort of timeline to win certain goals and objectives? So that's Joe.
Yeah. Is that in terms of just the CDE or across the board in the company?
It's across across your from a BIM perspective. Obviously, BIM covers, it's a very broad umbrella. It covers many applications, covers many processes.
Yeah.
So it's more of a global thing of how your company approached it and the sort of timeline that you give yourselves, or goals and objectives.
Yeah, well, at the moment, what we did is we broke down, I suppose, by area. So I don't need to sit with Mick and tell him exactly how to use like Revit. He doesn't need to know how to Revit. So everybody's, I suppose, module, we broke it down into modules firstly. So we broke it into 10 modules. Introduction to BIM, BIM legal, BIM standards, PAS 1192. So we have a full section of BIM modules that looked at exactly, the terminology around BIM, how BIM works. If for instance, if we have directors that need to go and talk to someone about BIM, that they understand the terminology and exactly what they're talking about. Not going in to talk to a client and saying we're doing LOD 5000 or none of that sort of stuff. So we did that first. We set out the modules exactly for each area of the business, and we said in terms of training, that's one area we did. So we had the block for that. And we had a block for Revit training. We broke down Revit exactly with different modules that we needed to teach. Also for Navisworks. Then we also have a module now for architectural. Even though we are M&E, we want to be creating buildings. So to teach the guys how to create their own buildings, we have a section for that. We also have a section then for the CDE. So a section for how the guys would learn how the CDE works and the different areas. Obviously we have the application for on-site, and we have the application in the office. We have different sites of that, and then we have the other area of Bluebeam and how the paper works from site in the office and how that works. So we broke it down into modules. Then we set that out by who needs to do what module. Then we set time frames around, getting people in as soon as possible. So we keep a track record of who's done what and when, and that all feeds into our CPD program, which everybody has access to. It's online, it's collaborative. At the moment, all of our, I suppose, tracking is done through Google. Google is a very powerful, that's what they use in DOT, it's a very powerful collaborative tool. So we use Google to share our information, so the guys can log in anytime and update their CPD information. But in terms of the BIM and how that goes forward, if we need to, we have a progressional program that, you know, we'll keep working with the guys through each module. We haven't got goals on that, but if there's a given project, then we will set deadlines around that. But it's a continual program all the time, because we're always learning. I'm always learning. The guys are always learning, and it's not only is it, I suppose, the workshop that's on weekly. At the moment, it's somebody feeding the information, but we want to be at the stage where it's not somebody feeding from the top. That it's just a workshop, and we're all working together, and somebody is feeding in, and somebody else is feeding in, and, you know, I found this online, or I have this ad in, and what do you think it is? That's the way I want as a workshop, as a team. Like, really what we're trying to do across the company is to build that team mentality, that we all work together and get away from that silo mentality, and that's really what we are trying to do. That's what we're trying to get across in the presentation, is in that, you know, we're all part of the same company. You know, don't think that just because you work in a mechanical, you're mechanical, or electrical, or finance, or FM. We're all together. We help each other. You know, we all engage with each department. So that's very important, and hopefully that answers your question.
That was a timely intervention by your boss there. Just happened that, Joe. Go ahead.
Good morning. David Fallon is my name, from CNF Quadrant. We're the Irish agent for Bosch. It's just with regard to a question for Chris. With regard to the FM benefits with BIM, which most of us are familiar with, but trying to communicate that back to the client is always very difficult, particularly if there's cultural issues around data, sharing data, for security reasons and just cultural reasons. I'm just wondering how, in your experience, has this been overcome in the US or anywhere else you're familiar with? Particularly the legal aspect of data protection and sharing that information and the Internet of Things and the way it's going to go.
I guess my question is back, are you talking about the handover back to the owner once you've performed this, or at what point in time are you talking about sharing the information? Is that during the coordination phase, or just the handover of the information at the FM stage at completion?
The ongoing sharing of information once the plant is operational.
Okay. There's different regulations in the states depending on who you're working for. Private companies have their own standards or stipulations. In that it varies over the year, is the easiest way to say it. If you do any federal work in the states, then it has to be in a certain security tier data center, and it's not allowed to leave the country, and it has to be proven to not leave the country, which is very, very difficult. And to the point, the last time that I did this with the federal government, you didn't have systems in place that would have put you on the cloud and back overseas or anything, so it was a little bit easier to manage at that time. I haven't had to deal with it in that respect since. But it's, I am personally very against those mandates that try to keep information within certain country boundaries, because it really limits what we're capable of. But we do have some very, very secretive clients that I've worked for, and rightfully so, in different sectors, where if you're a month late to the market compared to somebody else, you could lose 80% market share. And they're not going to allow any of that information to get out anyway. It's just every case is case by case in that point. And in those, you do occasionally have to set up entire networks that are on site, and that's it. Everything is going to be housed on that network. You set up everything through that server stream, and it stays there, and it's going to be wholly housed by the client. It just depends how secretive it needs to be per project. So, but usually if you get into anything like that, if a client is serious about security in that, they have a solution for you as well. Right? They at least know how to talk to you about it and work through setting that up.
Maybe a last question down here before we're going to, I know, Alan, you want to say maybe a few words at the very, very end? Just Ralph, pass the mic down here, just for this, and then I'll just wrap up.
This is a question about the education challenge. I think the last CSO said there's about 200,000 people working in construction in Ireland, and bringing IT to that industry at 20 people per semester, that's going to take 1,000 semesters, which is about 500 years. How do we meet that challenge of upskilling the industry? Any ideas around that?
Can I respond initially? Yeah. Just in the first iteration, we're limiting the group very specifically for sound academic reasons. After that, we're quite willing to significantly increase. So hopefully we'll bring it back from 500 years. But I mean, we could be talking about groups of 44. We could be talking about groups of larger than that. We could be running each semester. Let's see where we're at. Let's test the thing out, and then let's talk about ramping it up. That's absolutely fine. We have the capacity. We'd love the challenge, but we're starting, and we're going to be very careful about what we're doing. Make sure we've got the learning, and then move forward. It's only 13 weeks. In January, we could be running the next iteration twice the size, 3 times the size.
Ralph, it's a really good question, and it's part of this culture change that we talk about. And it doesn't start in third level. It starts right back in national school, going into secondary school, and going into third level. We've got to completely relook at how we educate in terms of the built environment. Anybody who's interested in coming into this fantastic industry, and to break down the barriers that are there is an extremely difficult thing to do, because those people educated in those domain silos, which are brought through then into industry, as we well know, it's so difficult to do that. And in my own opinion, it's an idea that I'm putting forward in any forum that I can do. I think we need to break down this idea of architect, engineer, surveyor, construction manager. We are building professionals with skill sets. And once you start to think about yourself on the basis of a building professional with a skill set, it immediately changes your mind. It changes the culture that we work in. Collaboration then becomes a reality and a proper prospect in order to take on the challenge that is in front of us in terms of design and construction over the next 100 years.
Okay. Just add one comment to that as well. The meeting that I talked about that took place yesterday, our Manpower Education and Training Committee, I mentioned earlier on the fact that it's not a risk that these people have drifted out of construction. We lost so many people that were employed in construction over the last 7 or 8 years, but they've been upskilling themselves. They've primarily chosen ICT as a destination for the courses that they wanted to do. But going back to Malachi's point, you guys in this element of construction, for want of a better term, this aspect of construction, the IT, the smarter side of it, have got the benefit of a debate that's been going on for the last 3 or 4 years in CIF and amongst our members. How do we get the trades back in? How do we get the skill set up? Because the increase in demand for services is going to come, which it is now. How do we get the people to look at construction again as a viable career? And some of the things that we're kicking around, I mean, it's not about reinventing the wheel. Look at IT, look at Coder Dojo, look at the young groups. I mean, if it's not football or horse riding or something else, but on a Saturday morning, young Joe of the future is saying to his mother and father, I am going to Coder Dojo. I want to go. You can see it all over Twitter. You can see it all over LinkedIn. I mean, they're fantastic images. I've been watching BBC News pretty early in the morning, this last few mornings. You see the slide on BBC now at the minute where 1 million kids have been given a bit. I forget the exact term, but a one gig bit or something. 1 million children have been given it to code, this year. So there are fantastic ways of doing it. There are people doing it already. We don't have to try and think of a new way. We just need to copy it and make it better. And refer to the title, Smarter Building Series. You guys are here in the room because you're smart. I'm not going to stand up here for much longer. It's great that we were lean, that we compacted, we got quality over quantity. But the one last point, one of my colleagues was talking to me about Brexit, and it's been a debate for some time. And James, I've got some skin in the game as well because I'm from the north originally. But I would like to think it's possibly the biggest opportunity for Ireland Inc. for the 26 counties, and possibly the north at some point in the future. The decision that's taken next week, because of the fact that this could be after next weekend, the only English-speaking country in Europe, you know. So I'll leave you with that. Alan?